Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Programming by Stealth, and this is Tidbit 11, Part 2, recorded January 18th, 2025. And I'm your host, Allison Sheridan, and of course, I'm joined by your co-host, Bart Bouchatz. How are you doing today, Bart?
Bonjour. That's all my French. Sorry.
Oh, dear. Well, so we're continuing Tidbit 11.
Yes, which was 2 weeks ago, I think. Yeah, we didn't skip a week, yeah. So I teased everyone by saying, so after we learned Bash, I didn't really use Bash anymore, and I started using PowerShell, and it turns out that it's actually really good. It may be by Microsoft, but it's open source, it's cross-platform. We can install it from Homebrew. And then we talked a little bit about getting our tooling set up, so getting Homebrew installed, getting PowerShell installed via Homebrew. And then when you're ready to take it to the next level, you can use VS Code, the open source IDE from Microsoft, which also rocks. Now we talked a little bit about the fact that it's functions all the way down. So in PowerShell universe, a script is just a function in a file by itself. So everything you learn about functions, it's true of scripts. And in fact, the PowerShell commands you type with the command line are also just functions in disguise. So everything's functions all the way down. We talked about how the plumbing was completely reinvented. So there's a special pipe for data. And then we get 4 pipes for output to humans, which are effectively output to the terminal for information, output to the terminal for errors, for warnings, and for debugging, which is the fourth stream. And I think that they're sort of the main headings, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Then we hit our breakpoint.
Right. So we took a break because it was getting a little, it was getting too long for me to pay attention that long, and maybe for everybody else.
Yeah, and then because we split it up, I then didn't stop writing show notes. So if anyone listens to this and goes, oh my God, Bart thought this was one episode, what you're going to get today is a little more padded out than you would have got if we'd done it all at once. But it was still too long, so we still had to break it up. So the next big difference, the thing that the PowerShell had the benefit of learning from, right? Because they're not better than the people who wrote Bash. They just had 30 years more experience of how people script and what doesn't work, So when you reinvent the wheel 30 years later, you can do better, right? Like carbon fiber and cool stuff. So the next thing they did better is how basically arguments, what we would think of as arguments, but in, parameter is this just another word for argument. And in the PowerShell documentation, they chose parameters. So I guess we should get into that habit here. But they added a big level of explicitness to how arguments work to your scripts. So in Bash, it's kind of the Wild West. So Bash just says, the first thing you give me is the command, and then everything after that is split on space, and they're just your arguments. And if you want to assign meaning to them, that's your problem. And there are tools to help add conventions, like we learned about getopt. So with getopt, you can say minus and then a single letter, and then maybe space and a value. But what's happening under the hood there is that getopt is breaking the long list of arguments apart and picking out the named ones.
Isn't it getopt?
Well, they both exist. We looked at one of them, and the other one also exists, but is a little bit different. Just to prove my point.
Okay, great.
And there's also an even more complicated one that gives you the minus minus followed by a big long name. It's also a completely different C library that you can use in your Bash commands for a whole different way of doing arguments. So it's kind of the Wild West. Whereas PowerShell were like, no, we're going to build this into our scripting language. We're going to give you a mechanism for predefining your arguments, which gives us a few interesting superpowers that we'll get to. So its view of arguments or parameters, as we've got used to calling them, is that they come in 2 flavors. There are named arguments, which are a single minus and then a long descriptive name. So minus some name. It's not just a single letter. And then there are arguments with no name, and they're called positional. So you have positional parameters and named parameters.
So let me guess. Positional parameters are based on its position. PowerShell knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're numbered from 0. So positional parameter
numbered.
0, positional parameter.
Wait, so they're a number?
That's how you describe their position, right? So the first one that isn't named is at position 0.
Okay, got you. Okay, but by its position, PowerShell understands what to do with it. It doesn't need a name.
We have to tell it.
Oh.
No, but this is a good thing.
I'll let you keep going then.
Because, okay, so positional parameters, when you're typing them with the command line, they don't have a name. And named parameters have a name. Very sensible. And the named parameters come in 2 flavors. They can be what PowerShell calls a switch, which is equivalent to a flag in Bash. So it's just minus something, no value. So minus verbose for enabling debug, say. It's just a single word. Or they can have a value, in which case it's basically minus name, space, and then the value. So you've named parameters with a value, and you've named switches. And so if you're looking at it on the command line, it's minus and then some name. And in your code, it becomes $some name.
Right. So, I think we saw that last time, right?
We did, because that's how we were doing with minus number became $number.
Right.
And if
I'm
switch,
just showing off that I've remembered something. I appreciate you replicating it, but...
Hey, it's been 2 weeks. I have to scroll up to double check what we did. And then the switches, which I think of as flags still, because I've spent too long writing Bash, they just get the value true or false. So they will appear in your code as $, whatever their name is, with the true or false.
Okay.
So you always have to define your parameters. And we've seen a hint of this before, right? Because when we were doing our scripts, we were saying param and then some stuff, $number. So the param is how you tell PowerShell this function or script expects a parameter, and then you tell it about that parameter. And the most important thing you have to tell it about the parameter is the name. So inside your code, they will always have a name, which kind of makes sense because you're going to be variables. But you have the power to hide the name from your users if you want to. So from the user's point of view, they can be positional, but they will always appear in your code with a name. So when you're coding, you can call them something sensible.
I don't like that. I like it to have a name. It should have a name, but okay.
You'll see this in action. It's quite useful.
Okay.
So you always have to give your parameter a name. So the simplest parameter definition is just $, and then its name.
Okay.
And you can have multiple parameters by separating them with a comma, all inside the call to param. And you can start to give more information about the parameters, and that goes over multiple lines. So the comma is important. You say a bunch of stuff about first parameter, comma, a bunch of stuff about the second parameter, and a bunch of stuff is allowed to be multiple lines, depending on how descriptive you're going to be today.
So they make it so you can format it to be readable, and yet that last comma is what says, okay, now we're talking about a new parameter.
Yes. And also, the other thing to help your eye is that the last thing you do is give it its name. So you see blah, 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 $ something, comma. Blah, 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 $, something, comma. And so the $, something is very helpful.
Yeah.
The documentation tells you, please give your parameters a type. Please help PowerShell know what is okay. Do I want a number? Do I want a string? What do I want here? And so you do that by putting the type you want in square brackets in front of the name. So if we wanted 4 parameters that were a string, a whole number, a decimal number, or one of these switches, you would say open square bracket string $ my string parameter, comma, open square bracket int, close the square bracket $ my integer parameter, double, or switch. And that will become your Boolean true false.
Okay.
So why do you want to bother? Apart from feeling good because you're doing what the documentation says, which is, hey, it's nice to do the right thing, right? But that's not a particularly good reason. The first thing you get for free is that, if possible, PowerShell will coerce the type. So if you tell it, I need an integer, and you type in 4.678, well, that'll just become 5. It'll just be coerced to an integer.
Well, that one's a little dangerous. I was thinking you were saying, like, if I wrote FORTY -TWO or space TWO or something, it might go 42.
It wouldn't do that one, but if you ended up
quotes.
giving it the string 42, you absolutely will get the number 42.
The number 42. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes more sense.
And this becomes a little bit more powerful than you think, because if you give it a date in a nice, one of the ISO formats, and it's quite permissive in the different formats it'll accept, it will convert that to a date time.
Oh, nice.
Where you can immediately start doing date and time math.
Oh, beautiful.
And it just knows, oh, this is a date. So if you're saying add 5 weeks to this, no problem. I will give you a new date 5 weeks later. So pretty powerful, actually, the type coercion. The other thing you get is free validation. If it can't coerce the type, it will throw an error before even loading your function. So it's a very efficient way to just crash out. I don't even need to evaluate this code. This is going nowhere. This function needs a number and you gave me nothing. Good day, right? This function can't run. Another thing you can do is control the default value of all of your parameters. So the default is null. That's a weird sentence, but it is correct. So by default, the default is null.
The default value is
null.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I say my function will have a parameter called waffles, and you run my function and you don't give it any arguments, waffles will be null. Okay. So its default value is null. But it doesn't have to be. And the way you give it a default is wonderful. You just say equals and the value you want in the param definition. So type $name equals the default value.
Bart, you just invalidated what you said the last thing would be. You said it would be dollar variable or parameter name, comma.
Oh, okay, but sorry, so you're giving the parameter a name is the last thing you do, right? So it's name and value. It's a variable definition, right? It's going to look like a variable definition.
You're not just giving it a name, you're giving it the value.
The default value.
Right.
So I'm going to stop waving my hands for a little bit and do a little showing as well as telling. So we had a function 2 weeks ago called write hello world. Let's give that function a parameter so it can say hello to anything. But by default, it'll greet the whole world. So we're going to say our function is now called write hello. So we're going to say function write hello, open our curly, param, open the round bracket for param. We want a string, so square bracket string. We're going to give it the name $target, so the target of our greeting, right? I struggled a bit for a good name, but $target is the best I could do. Equals the string world. Write host in double quotation marks, hello, $target, exclamation point. And so if we call that function with no parameters, write hello, it just prints hello world. But if I call it and say write hello minus target waffles, it will print hello waffles.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So I mentioned that it can spread over multiple lines.
Even if you told it there should be a target, not giving it a target doesn't make it barf.
Right.
Because you gave it a default target. That's why. A default value for target. Gotcha.
Correct.
I just caught up.
So the other thing you can do is you can start giving your parameters what are called options. And you define these options by sticking a square bracket with the word parameter as a full word, and that's another function call. And you use that to give options to your parameter. And there are loads and loads and loads of possible options, but I just want to mention 3.
Before you do it, this syntax is going to make my head hurt. So we just said that to define a parameter, it's param space, open, close, round brackets with the name of the parameter and telling it it's a string or giving it a default value. So param space, open, close parentheses. Now we've got square bracket, parameter, open, close, round, close square bracket. And this means something completely different.
We're describing our parameter.
Okay.
So if it's going to go above one of these lines that gives our parameter a name. And what it's saying is for the parameter being defined here, these are extra options. So this is like, I'm giving you more information about $number or $target. So you're being more specific about what you want.
So you say it before
so the last thing is always the name, right? So if I had 5 parameters, I could have 5 calls to the function parameter. So set some options, give it a name, comma, set some options, give it a name, comma, set some options, give it a name, and then finish.
Okay. I don't like this syntax, but go ahead. You can't fix
the syntax is a little weird. You do get used to it very quickly because it does end up looking natural, even if it is weird. It just is weird. But yeah,
maybe I should let you keep going and describe what are these parameter options that we're going to be putting in here.
So there are lots of them, but I'm going to just tell you that there are many of them, but the 3 coolest or the 3 most useful, the 3 I have found myself actually needing are, one of them we've already seen, value from pipeline equals true. So that means that whatever arrives into our function from the pipeline is going to be this parameter. So we saw that last week when we piped 2 weeks ago, when we started piping numbers into our get double value function. So if you scroll back up to get double value, you'll see that, oh, look, we had that weird syntax. I just yada past it.
Okay.
So you could see the last thing we sort of did near our break was that we made our function get double so it worked with the pipeline. And we gave it the numbers 1, 2, 3, and we piped those straight into get double value. And then we piped those into get sum. And inside pipe double value, those numbers that got piped in became $number. So one got double.
You're asking for something very challenging. In the middle of trying to follow everything you're saying, you want me to scroll away from where we are and find it again. So I'm not going to do that. I have instead opened the document in another text editor to try to go backwards to figure out what you're talking about. So yes, you did use it.
Yeah, and I hand waved you past it.
Right.
But now I'm telling you what it really does. So it's one of these options. So we're basically saying that.
Let me try to say what I think you said it was while I was trying to listen and open the document again. It's a 3-way tie. The parameter options, this parameter option is saying you're going to get something from the pipeline, and I'm telling you want to take it.
Think of it slightly from the other point of view. Something arrives at the pipeline and PowerShell says, what do I do with this? And you're saying, me. I want that.
Oh, okay.
Plug that into me.
This param wants this parameter value from pipeline equals $true. Okay.
Yeah. So basically,
do you have to set the other ones to be $false?
You could, but you don't have to.
Don't need to.
You don't need to. You basically, it's an opt-in.
It could potentially go to more than one, though.
No. That will make PowerShell go, so I'm sorry. Think about it this way, Alison. It's the new data coming in is a male plug, and you're saying, I volunteered to be the female plug so that whenever something comes in, it slots into me. Click.
But what if I want to use this input number that's been given to us? I want to use it to add that number to something, and I also want to have it multiply something. I can't do both.
But it only needs one name, right? It's called $number, and whatever you want to do with it, it's now just a variable.
You're just assigning it to a variable. Sorry. Gotcha.
Bing, bing, bing.
Gotcha. Would make, well, I guess you could put it to, but no. Okay.
If
All
you
right.
really want to, you could start the function by saying $my other name equals $my first name, right? And then you've just duplicated it.
Okay. All right.
All right, where was I? Because I did scroll, because I'm silly.
See.
So that's the first one, is value from pipeline. The second one is position equals. This is how you say, hello, I'd like the first unnamed argument, please. Connect that to me. So position equals 0 says, give me the first one with no name. That'll be my value. Position equals 1, give me the second one with no name. So that's how you basically say, whatever they passed and didn't bother giving it a name, the first one goes here. The other interesting thing you can do, and I haven't got an example in the show notes because it's kind of an advanced thing, but I do mention it higher up in the notes and forgot to say it out loud, is that you don't have to assign the positional parameters to individual variables. You can make one parameter as long as its type is an array and say, I want all the positional parameters. Give me everything. I'm an array and I want all of the ones with no name. Just send them all to me.
I'm
And
not
that'll then be an array.
really following this positional parameter thing very well. I don't.
Good, there's an example coming.
Okay, you move on to the third one right away, and so I'm not going to. That's why I was going to stop you
Well,
there.
I'm going to give you an example that does all three. So I'm going
Okay.
to give you an example of... Okay, let's back up then. So if you say... I can be very specific. So the command to print a message is write-host, and then we give it a string. We didn't give it a name. We just gave it a string. That's a positional parameter.
Right,
so
but
that
why
is
would
the
something
parameter.
want that positional string?
So inside write-host, the code written by Microsoft to make write-host do its thing, inside that code, that thing you put there has to have a name so that it can actually print it to the screen. So
Okay.
under the hood, it has mapped that to a named parameter, which I happen to know from the documentation is -message. So that's actually the same as saying write-host space -message space hello target.
What's that got to
But
do
we
with what
didn't
position
bother
it
giving
is?
it a name.
Yeah, we did. We called it target.
No, that's its value. We said write-host a string.
Yeah.
So look only at line 5, right? The write-host line. Write-host is a function. We are calling it with one argument, a string. That could be waffles. And then I would just write waffles.
Okay.
So there is one argument there, a string. We did not give that argument a name.
But there's an argument. There's a parameter inside it, and it's not. Do you mean argument or parameter? Or is that the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is a string that we happen to be giving. We're building the string that includes
A parameter.
$target, but it
But-
could just
but the
be
string
hello
itself.
or hello
Okay.
world.
Okay. So
So
we've done write-host string. You're saying that string
Yeah.
doesn't have a name.
It's not a name parameter. We haven't given it a name. We've just thrown a value at write-host. So how does write-host know what to do with it? Well, the people who wrote write-host, they, inside write-host, had to give it a name. And they gave it a name by saying the parameter of type string named message accepts position 0.
Okay. Okay. It's a lot of layers of abstraction, but I think I follow you. Okay, let's keep going. See if we can do number 3, and then maybe I catch up when you put all 3 together.
Number 3 is a nice, easy one. Is this parameter mandatory? So if you say mandatory equals true, then you're not allowed not to give that parameter.
Makes sense.
Or the function just goes error. I'm sorry, I needed
Mandatory
one of
equals-
those and you didn't give me one of those.
Mandatory equals $true, right? Okay.
Yeah. So let's update our get double value function so that it does all 3 of these things. It will accept the pipeline, and it will accept position 0, and it's mandatory. So we're saying
It.
that the parameter called $number
Thank you.
of type double has the three options: value from pipeline, position 0, and it's mandatory. So we can now call get double value by just saying get double value 5. And it will know, position 0 is mapped to the name $number. Okay, $answer equals $number multiplied by 2. Right host, the number doubled is $answer. Right output $answer.
So the value of that, back to this position equals 0 thing, we have to tell it that because that's we're saying capture, but we already took value from pipeline equals true, $true. Why do we have to also tell it position 0? I thought we already grabbed it.
Okay, so look at how I am saying get double value 5. There's no pipeline there. I'm not piping. I could say 5 pipe to get double value, and then I'm making use of value from pipeline. Or now it has a new superpower. I'm just passing it as an argument. I'm saying, as a positional parameter, get double value space 5.
So we don't need value from pipeline equals $true for this command to work.
For this specific invocation of the function, we are not making use of that option.
We are instead making use of position equals 0. Thank you. Because I was trying, it seems weird to have them both in there, but what you're saying is you can pipe it to me or I can take the first one. So that's both options. Okay.
Right, you're trying to be flexible, right? What you would like is your functions and your commands to accept input in all different sensible ways. Don't make the developer do work to use your function.
Got it. And mandatory equals $true. Duh, you can't double a number you never gave me. Okay.
Precisely. So why should you go to this effort to give your parameter, to define your parameters in this rigorous way? You're giving them a name, you're giving them a type, you're setting these options. What's the point of this? The first bonus you get is that the PowerShell shell can actually help you. So if you are missing a mandatory parameter and you hit enter, the shell will ask you for the value. So if you copy and paste that get double value function into your shell first, and then run it without a parameter, just say get double value and hit enter, you've now done something that it can't do. But it knows $number exists and it should have a value. So it will ask you for one. It'll just prompt you, give me a number.
Can I ask you a dumb question while I'm trying to do this?
No.
How do you get it to, how do you get PowerShell to accept the autocomplete it's offering me? It shows it to me,
right
but
arrow,
hitting a tab doesn't do anything. Oh, right arrow?
Right arrow?
Ah, there we go. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to actually think because I do it so atomically. It's like when someone asked me, actually, I had to sit down and take the laptop off the better half because he asked me a very simple question. How do you move backwards between windows? Oh no, how do you move between windows in the same app on the Mac? And I was like, oh, it's easy. You just,
You had to go ask your fingers.
I had to go ask my fingers. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't say my own PIN number. I have to just imagine a little grid of 9 and then I know what it is. Anyway.
So this is supposed to be spitting the answer out twice, correct? 3 doubled is 6, 6. 5 doubled is 10, 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So one of those is the right host, which is the text to you, and the other one is the actual output going to could be piped to the next command. Yeah.
Got you. Okay.
So if you run get double value and you don't give it any arguments and you hit enter, PowerShell doesn't just throw you under the bus. It goes, well, you said I need a number and there is no number here. I'll just ask you.
Yeah, and it says supply values for the following parameters. Number.
Yeah, and lets you type it in. And if you type something wrong, it will be able to tell you, sorry, no, you're supposed to be a number because we've told it it's of type double. So if you type in waffles, it won't be happy.
I typed in L. Get double value. Cannot process argument transformation on parameter. Must convert it to system. Well, it's not a very friendly answer.
It's not the world's friendliest error, but it is telling
there it
you,
goes. The input string L was not in the correct format. could have told me it wants a number, but still.
It did give, well, this is why you give parameters good names, right? We did literally say, hey, it's looking for parameter named number. So that's pretty friendly. Anyway, that's a nice thing. The other thing you can do is you can actually tab complete a named parameter. So if you say write error space -m and hit tab, it will complete that to minus message. Because that's actually what's going on with write error. But it can do it on any function. So it can do it on get double value. So if you say get double value -n and hit tab, it will tab it out to minus number.
Wait, what? Get double value. Okay.
Space -n and just hit the tab key.
-m?
N. You're starting to type number, but you don't remember what was the full name of it? And hit tab, and it will tab it out.
Okay.
Because it knows. Like, it knows what you want. The other thing is that all of your IDEs can read these parameter definitions. And so the tool tips and the autocomplete suggestions, they all know what parameters to offer. So they can be really helpful in telling you what to pass to this function. Because you've literally told it this function needs a number, right? Mandatory equals true. And so the inside VS Code, it can give you all that stuff and auto-complete it for you or offer it as an autocomplete, etc. So it really helps IDEs be helpful. And the other thing is there's actually a built-in help command. So instead of hoping that developers write a man page, with PowerShell, you get a pre-built basic help page for every single function you write because you have to define these parameters. So at the very least, it can help you get the parameters right. And as we'll learn later, you can make the help way better. But out of the box, everything knows its own parameters. So you can say get-help space any PowerShell command, any PowerShell function, and it will tell you what it knows. And so if you do get help double value, it will tell you it takes a parameter named number.
Wait, get help double value or get help get double value?
Sorry, get-help space full name of the function or the command or whatever you're looking for help with.
Which is get-double value? Or... Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we named our function get-double value.
So it's not telling me everything. It's telling me it's a number, and then it says double, and then it says common parameters. It doesn't tell me all my parameters.
Well, we only defined one. We only defined the parameter number. The function get double value only defines the parameter
from
number.
pipeline equals true, position is 0, mandatory $true. We put in 3 parameters.
No, it's one parameter with 3 options. The options are, I can take the pipeline, I will take position 0, and I am mandatory, but I am one parameter named number.
Now, this is back to param is explaining the parameter, but parameter is not explaining the parameter. It's telling you things it could to do with it or what it's going to accept.
Yeah, it's describing. So it's come before dollar number. So it's describing what dollar number will be. And then you finally say, and we're calling it dollar number.
I think this is frustrating because every single other thing you've told me about PowerShell, the words make sense. This is the exact opposite of sense. Param is the parameter, and parameter is not the parameter.
I'm not going to argue it makes sense. It's strange syntax, but it's very powerful.
Oh, yeah.
You see it everywhere. So you
get used to it.
Yeah, it becomes second nature. Yeah.
Okay. So
it's
back
not
to
intuitive.
I do like the idea that get-help is going to tell you about it, but it doesn't seem like it told me very much about it. It just told me it takes a number.
Right, but literally, all we've done as a developer is say that this is a function that takes a number, and get-help has just magically learned that. We haven't done any extra work to help it in any way, right? And we can make our help better. So if you say get-help, say for write-host, which is a built-in function, you get much more documentation because Microsoft have provided more than the basic.
But what does it mean? It says syntax, get dash double value, square bracket dash number. Okay. That's the variable name that it's expecting. And then it says greater than symbol, double, less than symbol, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Angle brackets, double.
So
I don't know where it got double.
That's the type.
Oh, that's the type.
So,
okay. Okay, sorry. Yes. Okay, and then it says square bracket, angle bracket, common parameters. What is that?
So common parameters are something I'm about to talk about in a few minutes.
Okay.
So common parameters are things that exist in every PowerShell command.
Okay.
That's why they're called common parameters.
Okay.
So the reasons that it's great to formally define your parameters are that the shell can help you, your IDE can help you, and the help command can help you. And that's you just get all of that for free by defining your parameters. And it's very powerful. So the other thing we have is these common parameters, and they give us consistency, right? So in the universe of Bash, we have convention. And a great example of this is -v. Lots of commands obey the convention that -v means verbose mode. Tell me what you're doing. Yeah. And -vv means very verbose, and vvv means very, very verbose. But on some commands, -v means print the version number.
Oh, yeah.
Still -v, but there's no actual standard. It's just convention.
Okay.
PowerShell provides you actual standard common parameters. So every single PowerShell command has a bunch of these standard parameters, and they are documented. There's a link in the show notes to the document, and it just lists them all. So every single PowerShell command has these common parameters. And that is just very useful. But it's cooler than that. You can adopt them. You can simply say, yeah, do you know something? My functions should behave just like Microsoft ones. I'm going to adopt these common parameters into my function.
Oh.
And you do that by just starting your function with square bracket, commandlet binding, open, close, round bracket, close square bracket. And that one line says, just adopt them all. Pretend I typed all those parameters into my param statement. Just take them, take the standard parameters and bring them into my function.
But we didn't do that in get dash double value, and the help says that we did. It says common parameters.
By not doing it explicitly, we've taken them, but only as a pass through. So that means that if we call inside our function one of the standard functions, we'll pass through the standard parameters, but we're not really using them in our own code.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask you to let me wave my hand at that one.
Good, yeah. Hand waving accepted.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a really subtle difference, but too subtle. Let's not take that. So let's illustrate the power of the standard common parameters by adopting -verbose, which is the PowerShell equivalent of one of the two -v conventions. So the one for verbose is -verbose. And so if you start your function with commandlet binding, your function now has a -verbose switch. You just got that for free. And this allows us to change. So at the moment, you notice that when you ran get double value, it printed some English telling you what it had done, $number doubled is, blah, blah. And then it wrote the actual number to the output stream. But that's noise, right? Mm-hmm. Unless I was debugging my function, I don't actually want it to tell me what it's doing. I wanted to just take the answer and shove it into the output. So really that message should be a debug message. So that means we shouldn't be doing write host, we should be doing write verbose. But how do we make that actually behave itself? And the answer is we simply say, use the commandlet bindings, and then just change the function to write verbose. And now it will behave like a standard PowerShell function. So if we call our get double value with any value, it will just give us the answers. It'll just, so if we call it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll print 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And it won't show us that text.
Oh, that's
Unless,
funny. I was thinking you were going to do the opposite. To me, the verbose one was throwing that extra dollar answer at me. I see what you're saying.
Right. So by default, it now doesn't shout at us. But if we want to debug our code, we can now say minus verbose. So if we take those same numbers and pipe them to get double value minus verbose, now it will show us the extra text. So when you're writing your own code, my code is full of minus verbose statements, absolutely full of them. And while I'm working on my script, I run my own script with minus verbose, and I'm watching it very carefully, what's going on here. And then when it goes into production, it's quiet. It only tells you important information, warnings and errors in your actual outputs. It's not yakking away at you all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing you'll have noticed is that when you run this, when you do run it with minus verbose, the debug messages are explicitly marked as being debug messages.
Yeah.
They say square bracket, verbose, close square bracket, and they're in yellow.
No, it doesn't have any brackets on it, but it's all in capital letters. Verbose, colon, 1 double is 2, and it's yellow.
Okay. Yeah, it's yellow. Sorry, it's not square brackets. It's just the word verbose, and it's yellow. The yellow is particularly what sticks in my head. Because, yeah, it's quite noticeable. So there are lots of these common parameters, but in my experience, there's 3 of them I use all the time. So minus verbose is how I do all of my debugging. It's really cool. There is an amazing one. Any PowerShell command that does irreversible changes, or sorry, not irreversible, just destructive in any way. So delete, change, they will all have minus what if, which means do this, tell me what you would do, and don't do a bloody thing. So if you want to write a script to clean up your home directory, if you adopt the standard commandlet bindings, you can then have your function be able to be run with minus what if, pointed at your home directory, and instead of it deleting files, it will tell you, I would have deleted this and I would have deleted that. And then you can be sure, okay, so my script to clean all files older than 6 months is doing exactly what I thought. And then you rerun it without the minus what if, and it will actually do the deletions. So in the real world, none of my PowerShell scripts that in any way change things don't support minus what if. They all support minus what if. And everyone knows that if Bart wrote the code, you can safely run it with minus what if, and it won't break anything.
So I just tried running our get double value with what if, and it's barfing all over at me. It doesn't like it.
Right. Correct. Because we haven't implemented what if because double value isn't destructive. So in order to use what if, we have to give a little bit more information to commandlet binding. So we have to say commandlet binding and we're opting into what if. But I haven't shown you that here because this is just a little quick,
okay.
This is just a teaser. But if you think about it, get double value is getting something, so it's non-destructive.
Okay.
So none of the PowerShell gets have a minus what if because they're not destructive.
There's something we have to type into our code. It's something the developer of this shell script has to enable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you're writing destructive code, it provides you, and they're it's very simple to do, but you basically need to wrap the parts of your code that do damage is the wrong word, that make changes. You wrap those in a function, and then you give it a piece of text that's the alternative. So I'm about to do this dangerous thing, or do this dangerous thing. And when you run it with minus what if, it just tells you what it would do. Otherwise, it actually runs the function. And so you find the two pieces.
What it would do is the text that you said. Like, I'm gonna delete everything in this directory.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's very powerful. And when you combine minus verbose with minus what if, you get really good debugging. because you're telling me in great detail, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. I would do this horribly dangerous thing. I would do this, I would do this. And then when you're happy, you take those two flags off and you let it rip. And it does whatever it is and without it breaking everything. Like managing Active Directory is all done in PowerShell. So cleaning up old accounts, you don't want to get that wrong. You don't want a star in the wrong place, right? Speaking as someone who once emptied the domain, that was in the days before PowerShell. Terrifying. The other really powerful one is minus error action, which tells PowerShell, if there's an error here, what do I do? Do I show you the error and carry on regardless? Or do I stop the whole script here?
Okay.
And so if you're inside a loop, you may want the error action to be continue. It's like, well, I want you to loop over these 5 things, and if one of them fails, don't kill my whole script. But you know something? There are lots of times where I want, if anything goes wrong in this script, stop. Don't keep going. Don't try to keep going. Stop. And you do that by saying minus error action, stop.
Okay.
And you're basically saying, this is fatal. Just now, go away, right?
Right.
A good example is connect to database. If the connection to the database fails, do not run the rest of the script because they're all going to fail. Exactly. So that they are some of the common parameters, and it's great that they're the same everywhere, and you can adopt them into your own code easily, which means that your code can behave like everyone else's code. So when you download someone else's PowerShell and they're not idiots, it will behave just like standard PowerShell. It's wonderfully refreshing. That consistency is amazing. So I mentioned that the get help system is there. Well, you can do way more than just what it does by default. You can literally add comments in front of your function to add the documentation. And you just put a big multi-line comment and it has a specific headings you give it and they will output the right values. So if you just go get help double value, you've already seen it says name, syntax, aliases, and remarks, and they're all none. Mm-hmm. Because we haven't added any of these special comments to our function, right? It's just default, so it gives you very bare answers. But if you do the same for right error, it gives you a lot of information. And the scary thing is, if you want even more, you can run it with minus detailed. Or if you really like scrolling, minus full. You get insane amounts. The other thing that I say in my show notes that I forgot to say out loud is if you have a brand new install of PowerShell, you may need to once run the command update-help, and that's going to download the extra details from Microsoft for right error and all the standard functions.
Update dash,
if you haven't
is it
done
capital H or something?
Capital U update dash capital H help.
All these capital letters is odd, but no.
It's always
capital
Pascal
U
case.
P DATE space dash capital HELP.
No space. No. Update dash help. It's for
It's not a flag. It's a got it. Okie dokie.
So now if you run get dash help space right dash error space minus full, I don't want you to read it. What you'll notice is there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, whoosh. So you have that level of documentation for all the standard commands. What I find much more useful is the minus examples flag, which allows you to only see the examples of how do I use right error. So get dash help, right dash error, minus examples. 99.9% of the time, just show me some examples and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So we can add this level of documentation to any of our own functions. The only minor thing is they need to be in a file for the comments to exist to be able to give the help. So this is for your scripts. So if we turn get double value into a script by sticking it into a text file with the .ps1 extension, then we can add the comments. And the comments are very Englishy. So it's a period followed by the field you're defining. So dot synopsis for a little one sentence, really pithy description. Dot description, you're allowed to be nice and chatty. That could be multiple paragraphs. Dot parameter number, you don't have to tell it the type and stuff because that's all down in the code. But you can give it some English. So you can write a description of what number is, in this case, the number to be doubled. So you can give it a little English description.
Number in this case doesn't have a dollar in front of it. That seems odd.
It doesn't, because on the command line it won't either, right? It's going to be minus number.
Right, it's got a minus in front of it. So it's got a minus in front of it. We said then it's a dollar inside. Now this has nothing at all. That's it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It is. Dot outputs is how you describe what the pipeline will spit out, what it will put into the pipeline. And the line above it, which I skipped over, is dot inputs, which is what it will expect to receive from the pipeline. So our function expects to receive a number from the pipeline. So we say its type, system.double, values from the number parameter. Yeah, that's not very descriptive.
A little bit here that it's got periods in it, like it's a sentence, but it's not a sentence. It's an official thing. System.double dot. Values for the number parameter dot. Is this just English?
The second bit of it is system.double dot is you telling it the type.
With a period,
and then the rest of it,
sentence that isn't really a sentence. Okay.
And then all the other sentences are sentences. Yeah. And you can have as many of those as you like.
I can still see it, but I want to make sure that didn't have, I mean, you could leave it off. It would just be harder to read, or no? It might barf.
I'm trying to remember. There's a special word you put there instead to say whatever. I'm not going to tell you this. Just I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Do you have a text expander snippet for all of this? Don't nod your head on an audio podcast, Bart.
Of course I do. Yes. In fact, I have a couple because sometimes I want functions that do use the pipeline, and sometimes I want them that don't use the pipeline. So I have a few different snippets to give me the different templates. But yes is your answer. Dot example, you can give lots of dot examples. They become the examples that you then get when you run it with minus examples.
Are they just
and there's
text,
actually,
or these have to be precise?
No, they can just be text. The convention is you put the command in a PS prompt. Okay. So PS arrow angle bracket, and then the command, and then the rest is by convention the output. But you could write waffles pancakes. It will be a very useless example, but you could write whatever you like.
Okay.
And then we just copy and paste in the rest of our function, right? The rest of the code is exactly the same. And now we can get help on /getDoubleValue.ps1. And now it gives us this proper description. So name is the path of the script. Synopsis is our synopsis. The syntax, it worked out for itself. The description is our little paragraph. We didn't specify any related links. And then the remarks give the user some information for how to see more value. A nice one is minus examples, which is suggesting to us. And if you do that, then you'll see the two examples we added in our little comments.
Oh, that's interesting. So the examples aren't part of the regular help. You have to explicitly ask for examples.
Or say minus detailed or minus full.
Not verbose.
So minus detailed gives you more information than you get by default. Minus full gives you everything. And minus examples cherry picks to just the examples.
Okay. Huh. I see a lot of space in the output. Like there's empty space that you didn't put in your file.
Yeah. PowerShell on the terminal uses space to tell you I'm ending a section and I'm starting another section. Because it can't make the text bigger
It's giving 2 lines each time.
Yes. Yeah, so that's its way of saying, pretend I could write a big heading. But it can't write a big heading, so it puts a big space.
Except when it doesn't. Sometimes it only gives 1 line. That's odd. I was starting to fix it, thinking it was a typo of yours, and I thought maybe that's what it does. Okay.
No, that is what it does. That is what it does.
Okay.
You'll also notice that if you go to the official API documentation, it's a very pretty web page, but the headings are all exactly the same as they are here. It's just, it's a nice HTML page, in which case it doesn't have all the spaces. It can do nice presentation with code tags and syntax highlighting and stuff.
Right.
But it's the same information that's getting translated to HTML. Okay. So the developers are writing these comments and it's being spat out as a shiny web page or as the output of the help command. So the get help command. It's very powerful. And if you get into the habit of writing these comments on your own code, your IDE will show you the same information when you hover over it. So as well as telling you this function expects a parameter named number, it can also put the text because it can read those comments. So VS Code will read those comments and include all of that in the little hints it gives you. And so if you start writing code and sharing it with colleagues, they'll get a lot of help from your comments.
Okay.
It's very powerful. Okay. So the other thing you'll notice, I think you've called attention to it a few times, so there's a lot of consistency here, right? So everything is with its leading uppercase letter, right? It's always Pascal case, which is like camel case, but with a leading capital. And PowerShell is very opinionated. So much so that if you're only writing code for yourself, you can kind of get away with being loosey-goosey. But if you tell PowerShell, import this module from elsewhere, it will check the code against the conventions and it will give you warnings. It won't fail to import it. It'll just tell you, by the way, this code you've just asked me to import has a whole bunch of functions with non-standard names. This code is not going to behave the way you expect, basically. And the result of that is that all of the code you get shared in GitHub and stuff does follow the convention. Because otherwise, it just shouts at people all the time. So you get this consistency everywhere.
Nice.
So it's all Pascal case. The other thing is this verb noun thing, that is not just everywhere, but there's actually a list of verbs. And it's a really well written document because it tells you by new, we mean blah, blah, blah. If you actually meant this other thing, you should use this other verb. And so it has a disambiguation section for similar verbs. And actually, no, there is a subtle difference between create and set and these kind of things.
New versus
create
add,
and new or whatever.
Find versus search. Huh.
Yes. And it describes the difference. And there's also sections. So when you're processing data, there's data verbs. And it tells you the verbs you should use for when you're talking to a database or whatever, connect and disconnect and a bunch of other things. And then there's verbs for managing something being published and unpublished and stuff like that. So it breaks the verbs into categories.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great
verbs.
consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Security verbs. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So the result is you could almost guess. So if you have a convert to -CSV, it doesn't take a genius to know convert to -XML will do an XML conversion and convert to -JSON will do a JSON conversion. Right? So this consistency is very liberating. It really helps you write your code and to use other people's code. And as I've hinted at already, there is a very powerful module ecosystem. So you can bring in other people's code in a very controlled way. And so there's something called the PowerShell Gallery, which is the equivalent of NPM, which is this amazing place full of cool packages that are just sitting there for you to use. So out of the box, you get import CSV, import JSON, and import XML. But what if I want to import an Excel file? Well, there's a module called import Excel. So you say install das module -name, import Excel, And you will now have a new command that you can use called import-excel.
So right inside PowerShell, we don't have to be homebrewing that or anything.
No, you can pop that into your PowerShell and it will then install it. It actually installs it into your home directory. So there'll be a directory in your home directory called PowerShell modules.
Oh.
And the code you install goes into the PowerShell modules folder. And so if you get something horribly wrong, it's only in your home folder. So just blow it away. Right, okay. Start over, make a fresh modules folder. It's very powerful. So the last thing in the show notes, and I don't know whether or not we want to talk through this in English, but the show notes end with a section called a very basic syntax primer. And it's just some examples of how you do the different things like comments, defining variables, creating arrays, creating dictionaries, or hash tables. Something that takes a little getting used to. The operators all are in the bash style. They're minus whatever. So it's not double equals, it's minus EQ. If you want case insensitive, it's minus IEQ. And if you want case sensitive, it's minus CEQ. You have minus like for your star dot whatever style command line syntax, or minus match for regular expressions. So native regular expression support. You can see why I like this, right?
Oh,
minus LT for less than, minus GT.
The operators aren't in Pascal case, Bart.
Yes, which makes them really stand out in your code.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very deliberate decision. It's very obvious.
I realized the other day, bring up regular expressions. I realized the other day that I'm never going to write one again. I will have ChatGPT write them for me. I will never try to write them.
I was just going to say, you're going to use them as much as ever, maybe more.
Yeah, right.
You're going to write them. Yeah, okay.
Rate me this.
I don't disagree. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to look at one and tweak it than it is to start with an empty page and go, ooh.
Yeah.
So at this stage, I'm hoping that if you're interested, you're interested. So the next thing in the show notes is some next steps. And I think the most important thing is to bookmark the landing page for PowerShell on learn.microsoft.com, which is linked in the show notes. And that page is the home of everything to do with PowerShell. And it's a really good page to get to know well. So I'm just going to point out that you have a drop down at the top for your version. By default, it's going to be the current long-term support release, which is what you're going to have installed by default. So most of the time you don't have to touch that drop down. But if you're debugging a piece of code you wrote a while ago, maybe you want to change that back to 5.1 and see how the world was then. You can do that.
Well, does it auto-update? My PowerShell is going to say, hey, you're on an old version. Want the new one?
Homebrew will. Yeah. Homebrew will let you update.
No, that's not auto-update. Homebrew is give me updates.
PowerShell will shout at you when it's out of date. And it will tell you, please use Homebrew to update me.
Okay, good. That's auto-update in my book. Yeah.
Yeah. So depending on your definition, yes. So when you're in there, so you have that drop down, that's useful. The other very handy one is filter by title, where you can just start typing things. So that's always healthy. So, anyway, yeah, sorry. It's a filter box. I don't need to describe how a filter box works. But there's some sections in there that I think are particularly useful. So the top level section, Learning PowerShell, is really good for a beginner. So that's kind of where the PowerShell 101, the PowerShell 101 subsection is a really good place to start. And the deep dives, like if you want to understand how does PowerShell think about something, the deep dives are fantastic. It's like, well, what does PowerShell mean by a hash table? Go to the deep dive on hash tables or whatever, and you'll get a really detailed description. And then the other one I think is really important is the reference section, because that's where the API docs hide. And the stuff you care about, like the write-host and all those standard commands, they're microsoft.powershell.core. So if you go into microsoft.powershell.core in the documentation, you're going to see all the standard commands in there. Very powerful. And the other useful one is Microsoft.PowerShell.utility. Those core and utility, that's where the vast majority of the functionality hides. So armed with that, the documentation side is very useful. And that's what I do. I do a couple of things. Just PowerShell space what it is I'm trying to do into ye olde Google works great because there's an awful lot of really good stuff sitting on Stack Overflow. Mm-hmm. And if you take the function name and look it up in the API reference, between that and Stack Overflow, you'll always get what you need. So Stack Overflow will tell you, oh, you need the blah, blah, blah command. And then you're like, well, what does the blah, blah, blah command actually do? Well, let me look at the API doc and it'll show me all the different parameters and everything and let me figure it out from there. So I usually start on Stack Overflow and then or read the manual. Because especially if it's how do I write a PowerShell script to delete users from the domain? Well, I'm going to go read the actual docs just to make sure I'm doing what I think I'm doing.
Right.
Don't trust these people on Stack Overflow unthinkingly. So so we ended the first half by saying, if you're interested, give us a shout on podfeet.com/Slack. And spoiler alert, people did. And the answer is yes. Yes, we are interested. Yes, this is cool. Yes, we want to do this. So that's a little segue into our plans for 2025. And so we are going to do PowerShell, but it's part 2 of my agenda for 2025 for a couple of reasons. I need to do the thing on part 1 of the agenda for a few different reasons. So I kind of have to do that first. And also, the first thing we're going to do, the story is in my head, so I can start writing the show notes. I know what I want to say about PowerShell, but I haven't figured out how to turn it into a narrative. Where do I begin and how do I step through it so as to have maximum understanding and minimum confusion? And it's not straightforward to do that, to tell that story. It took me a while to get the story right with Git and with Bash. And so I need some more time to plan how I'm going to do PowerShell. So that's why PowerShell is second. So I'm going to give you a teaser of the mystery thing that is first, and that is GitHub Pages. So there are a bunch of reasons why you might be interested in joining us for a journey through GitHub Pages. And the first of them is that I'm going to teach you how you can all get free web hosting. Surprisingly powerful free web hosting on your own domain if you want, which is pretty cool. The other thing is, you've been listening along to this series for an amount of time. Maybe this is your first ever episode, but probably not.
That would be a very weird place to start.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah, Tidbit 11.
All the episodes you should not start with is probably this is near the top, halfway through a story.
Yes. So what you see is a pretty web page. And what me and Alison write is a bunch of markdown. How does the markdown, and a lot of our listeners contribute typo fixes to the markdown, and they'd make a pull request. I accept the pull request, or Alison accepts the pull request more often. Alison's way better at that than me. I'm much too slow. Sometimes I get to, but usually Alison does. Or when we take your pull request, the website magically updates. We're not updating any HTML. We're just saying, yeah, that markdown is fine. And then by some magic, this pretty web page appears. Well, it's not some magic. It's a bunch of really cool technology, which is GitHub Pages. So we're going to demystify what happens between pull request. Oh, look, I'm on a pretty web page. There's quite a bit happening in there. The other thing is that GitHub Pages is a full-featured content management system that doesn't need a database. It doesn't need hosting with PHP or some other server-side language. It allows us the same feature set in a completely different way. So it solves the same problem totally differently. It's a completely different way. And that there's swings and roundabouts. I'm not saying that this is better than the other. They're different. And one of the advantages is there's no infrastructure for you to manage. You don't have to have a database, which, I mean, it's difficult to have a database, but it's work.
It's static.
Yeah.
not dynamic. And so there isn't any need for a database, right?
Exactly. So it's a very different way of achieving that end. And so the technology is less complicated or different complicated. The infrastructure is less complicated. That's the right way to say it. The other thing is that GitHub Pages has full support for a technology that enables us to fully utilize Bootstrap. So I have been living in dread of someone asking what may or may not seem like an obvious question in hindsight. We've learned a lot about Bootstrap, and we've made lots of example Bootstrap pages, and they all look like Bootstrap pages. They have a look that is identical in everything we've done with Bootstrap. Now, the website for this series doesn't look like those examples, but it's 100% Bootstrap. The Bootstrap homepage doesn't look like our examples, but it is 100% Bootstrap. Bootstrap wrote their webpage in Bootstrap. So this implies we're missing something. We haven't touched on Bootstrap's customization. It's designed to be customized, and we haven't done that. We've taken it out of the box. And the reason is because we're missing a technology, something called Sass, which is a cool name. So it's a sassy technology, right?
Sass is in software as a service?
No, so it's SASS, not SAAS.
Okay.
Actually, it's interesting that we call SAAS Sass, because really it should be Sass. That doesn't sound good. So maybe that's why.
You're giving me some sass. So the first thing you want to do is explain GitHub Pages. Secondarily, this Bootstrap Sass thing that will allow us to style pages even in a static service like GitHub Pages?
Yes, GitHub Pages provides us Sass. So GitHub Pages out of the box can do any Sass. Bootstrap supports Sass. You customize Bootstrap with Sass. So basically GitHub Pages is ready for doing that extra cool Bootstrap stuff. We get it for free with GitHub Pages.
Okay. So the connection of those two things together, you said you'd be interested in seeing XKPassWD have some style that isn't just...
Yes, I would.
Guess what? We're a Bootstrap website.
Exactly. Yeah. And as we'll say, the customization in Bootstrap is really cool. And the reason it's called Bootstrap is it's supposed to be a starting point. And we've just used it as an endpoint. But it's actually designed to be customized. You bootstrap your style on top of Bootstrap. So, and so we're going to have to learn about Sass to be able to do that. So Sass is something we get for free with GitHub Pages, and Sass is the mechanism for customizing Bootstrap. So it all sort of gels together. It's all kind of mushed into the one topic. And Sass is a very cool language. It's basically CSS with superpowers. And the syntax is like CSS, only better. So it's not really programming. It is markup, but it's very powerful. Anyway, Sass rocks. So we're going to learn all about Sass. So that is my little sneak peek of the intended 2025. Now, I don't know about you, Alison, but I make lots of plans, and I won't promise everything goes exactly as planned. But this is our intention for 2025.
Yeah, we've taken a few diversions. I remember when we were going to do Python.
I forgot we even planned that diversion. I know PHP was on our list, and yeah, we've changed our mind a few times over the years.
Yeah. So we won't be doing PowerShell now. I'm going to put we may do PowerShell later. You said we will. But now we've put it out a ways out. Bart and I talked about this ahead of time, and I told Bart, have you ever noticed that I never do surveys? And the reason I don't do surveys is because it sets an expectation that you'll do what people asked for. And I don't want to do that. So
I've learned my lesson.
You answered yes, and we're not going to do it yet. But he's given you the tools, and I think that's why you fleshed out the end part of the show notes to give a lot more tools to help people take that extra step up in PowerShell beyond what the tidbits brought you.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully this is enough for people who are genuinely interested to get stuck in and start being productive. and then you can join in. I mean, a lot of the people who enjoyed our Bash series had been programming Bash for years, and they still got a lot out of the Bash series because we did it from first principles. And so the same is the intention to be true here for PowerShell, that even if you're already writing some PowerShell, you're still going to enjoy our dive into it because we're going to build it from the ground up. And then all the pieces usually make more sense. We got that feedback on JavaScript. We got that feedback on Git. We got that feedback on Bash. So I think that's what we do. We start at the basics and everyone learns something, even if you've been using the tool for years and years and years.
I'm still convinced I'm the only person who started this whole series without knowing anything.
So far in our community, yeah, it's all people who've gone, I dabbled and now I'm learning more. Whereas poor Alison started with, no, I genuinely didn't know any of this.
Empty slate. Well, my Fortran 4 with Watt 5, it's going to come in handy one of these days.
I'm trying to remember if there's anything we ever do with Fortran style syntax, and I don't think there is. Pascal style syntax, but no. Oh, I did Fortran 77 in university.
Oh, are you fancy? You and your Fortran.
Oh, yeah, that's the year. See, I looked at it as not fancy because 77 is like 1977. This is ancient.
In the 1900s. All right. Well, we've been going on a long time. We should probably close out. But this sounds like a fun path to me.
Excellent. Well, folks, Happy New Year. And of course, lots and lots and lots of happy computing.
If you learn as much from Bart each week as I do, I'd like you to go over to lets-talk.ie and press one of the buttons over there to help support him. He does 98% of the work here. I'm just the stooge that listens to him and asks the dumb questions. If you go over to lets-talk.ie, you can support him on Patreon, you can donate via PayPal, or you can use one of his referral links. I really hope you'll go over and help him out. In the meantime, you can contact me at Podfeet or check out all of the shows we do over there over at podfeet.com. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.